I'm Shelby Williams. You also know me as Biscuit Ballerina. We're having another season of dance talks with Biscuit Ballerina. This time we're putting them on YouTube for easier viewing. Today I have with me Isabelle Schramm. She is a psychologist, also a professional dancer in training and also her work experience. So she's gonna address a few subjects with us today and also in a later episode. Isabelle, can you introduce yourself a little bit and give us some of your background?
Hello, thank you so much. I grew up in Germany, so that's where I'm coming from. I was at the Hamburg Ballet School, then I went to Palooka School. And after that, I managed to get a job here in Geneva, where I'm still at, the Grand Théâtre. So I spent a few years here in the company, and after a while, I was like, okay, I had enough. So I left the company and I started freelancing. And while freelancing, I also had more time to maybe start again studying. So I decided to study psychology. So I did my bachelor first. And after my bachelor, I was okay, now I need to be in a real university, because before that I just did everything via online. And so I did my master's here in Geneva, and the big idea afterwards was to specialize in sports. That means now I can be there for dancers, use my own experience as a dancer. Since I was in a company, I came also from a very classical ballet school. So I had my journey with certain situations, let's say it this way, and I thought that maybe it could be interesting to just use also my experience and now the knowledge, also the theory in psychology, in order to be there for dancers. So this is now my main activity.
I mean, it's so wonderful. I'm always thrilled when I come in contact with or I get to know dancers who went into psychology, because it is so different from other things. I think it's very difficult for someone who's not been in a studio setting to understand exactly the dynamic in the space. And, you know, sometimes when suggestions are given from someone who doesn't know that work environment, it can be a little bit disheartening, because it feels like, well, you're not quite getting it. So it's really, I'm really thrilled whenever I see a dancer who's going into psychology. And with that, the theme today is going to be kind of one of the most common themes, I think, for anyone who works in a studio with mirrors and pursues this profession where you have to constantly audition. Even once, if you end up in a company setting, you're always auditioning for new choreographers. And that's the theme of criticism and rejection. Rejection comes in many different forms. It comes in not being accepted into a school, not getting a contract with a company, not even being invited to an audition, or not being cast in a piece. So we see it in many different ways. That kind of ties into also criticism, the criticism as to why we were rejected, or on the daily, looking in the mirror, self-criticism, corrections from people at the front of the room, also another form of criticism. What would you say you see when working with dancers are the most common negative effects on dancers because of the constant criticism and rejection?
Yeah, the most common thing I think is that it becomes your own self-talk, that the outside criticism becomes your own inner voice. And I think that's the most common I can see. It becomes something that is very harsh, very judgmental, and it kind of dictates everything that you do afterwards. And I think for myself, I experienced it as well. And now that I'm kind of more outside of the dance world, still as a psychologist, not as a dancer anymore, I can still hear this voice inside of me. And especially if you started at a very young age and you kind of had that for a very long time, you don't make the difference anymore. And what I can see afterwards is that this person is not only very harsh and hard, but also like don't want to also maybe talk about their needs, talk about their emotions, be vulnerable, because they want to act in a certain way and be in a certain way in order to receive love, recognition, and in order also to just be happy in your work. So it's the most common thing I can see, also with the thought of never being good enough. This is that kind of linked to perfectionism.
The like not wanting to be vulnerable, does that maybe also tie into putting up a facade that we have to do so often? I mean, that ties into constantly being told, you know, you need to make dance look easy. We don't show the struggle, but also we don't talk about the struggle with, for example, whoever's at the front of the room so often, because you don't want to show that you're weak, because that's another maybe point of criticism that, you know, you need to build a thicker skin.
Exactly. Always kind of mask it and not showing it. And then afterwards, when it happens that you have to struggle, you're not used to it anymore, also like to maybe show it, express it. And it's, I can see it in the sessions, it is sometimes very hard to just also like find words in order to say what was so hard, what was difficult, what kind of emotions came out of it, which is normal, and it's part of the journey. And then it's like, oh no, I don't want to complain. And it's like, it's not complaining, it's just telling what's happening in your inner side, and it's the way you function, which is again normal, because the situation was this and that. So this is what I can see, that it's like kind of masking and building up a huge wall in order to keep functioning, instead of like, oh, I can't let myself go down now.
Yeah. And also something else is just or at least this was my experience, is sometimes when you're constantly getting criticism or you're constantly getting rejection, you feel incapable of being objective in your own situation and viewing your own situation really clearly, because it has an impact on your emotions. You know, it's a big punch to the gut when you get rejection or when you get some harsh criticism. So then I experienced like, you know, self-doubt of, ooh, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am, or oh, I went in there feeling confident, but maybe I'm totally delusional about where I stand in the realm of the dance world, and how, you know, what are my chances of even making it in this profession?
Yeah, exactly. This is like really linked to your self-confidence. So how much can you see your own competence, your value as a dancer, which is different from self-esteem, which is your value as a person. So first of all, then maybe your self-confidence gets attacked and weakened and reduced. And this is hard. You need to fight against it and protect yourself. And then when it comes to your own person and your self-esteem and the value you attribute to yourself, then it becomes dangerous. And this is something I can see, especially with young dancers who were exposed for a very long time to rejection and criticism. They kind of start to doubt about themselves as a person, which starts to be very critical.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting that you clearly distinguish the two, your value as a dancer and your value as a person, because I think also because it's our passion, sometimes that's wrapped up into one. And we, you know, who we are as a person is we are a dancer. And so, yeah, of course, this is a whole nother subject. But then when someone does a career transition, people have a loss of identity. But yeah, how would you say, how do you encourage dancers to separate their identity from dancer and person, so that you don't have so much crossover of when, you know, your dance aspects of you are criticized? That's not a personal attack on you as a person.
The most easy way, what we say in general, is even when your performance was not as good as you expected, you as a person, you don't start to be a bad person. So even if that goes down, you as a person, your value always stays the same. And
great point.
That's something, this is something what you can hear also with your judgment. Maybe like even in class, you missed your jumps or your period. And then it's like, what do you say to yourself? I'm like, oh, I'm like beep, beep, beep. Or no, it's me as a person, instead of saying, oh, my period was not as good as I wanted to, and I need to work on that. So that's the difference sometimes, to see how do you talk to yourself and what is criticized, you or your competence.
Yeah. So, I like that idea of even just using the word of the step. Like whatever step, like it's this task that needs to be worked on. It's not me that needs to be worked on. It's you know.
Exactly. And what was wrong? Was it that your balance? Was it maybe also your focus, being concentrated or not? This is something that also maybe to see what do I need to work on also.
Yeah. Then kind of on the flip side, when we are faced with so much criticism or rejection, are there any positives that come out of it? Do you think there are things that develop in dancers' personalities that maybe we could focus on in any way, or?
It really depends on the person. Some do need it, some are used to it, and some think also love is kind of expressed this way. I can see that, and I respect that. I think in general, I haven't seen any positive effects, I must say, unless the person makes it constructive for them. Because I could hear sometimes that like a dancer said to me once in a workshop, or I hear this, but I'm like asking myself, what is the core information that I need to work on? Because it was very personal, it was very harsh, the criticism that was given to the dancer. And afterwards, this person kind of made a translation in order to make it constructive. And I was like, wow, this is a great coping strategy, keep going. But for others, if it's very personal and very deep, and also like many different rejections in a very short time, I don't think that is very, very positive unless you can really protect your human side behind it.
Yeah. And there's times where, I mean, we're naturally going to have several rejections in a row. I think of audition season, when people are looking for a job, particularly right out of school, and you really need to find that first job. And so you're doing multiple auditions and just putting feelers out to see what companies suit you. That's a moment where people are going to be faced with a lot of rejection back to back to back. I mean, very few people get a contract at every audition they go to. And on top of that, it's at a very vulnerable moment when you're making that bridge from student to professional. And then that's when you're kind of determining for yourself, is this a career I will be able to make it in? What then are some coping strategies to handle, that influx of rejection? I mean, you made a great point with how one of the dancers at one of your workshops mentioned, but what about things like at auditions, where it's not something where you're necessarily always getting really clear feedback as to why you're being rejected?
Yeah, this is something like what I kind of also help maybe dancers to prepare themselves mentally for auditions is not only have the only goal of getting a contract, but also have different goals that can be helpful in order to say like, maybe I want to have a fun time during the audition and this is my goal. And maybe if I get a job, it's even better. Of course, I'm definitely getting a job. It's obvious. But also like having a nice connection with the other dancers while doing it. So having different goals can also help to just protect your self-esteem and your self-confidence in order to say, like, I have different goals right now than just finding a job. So that it takes off the pressure of just, did I make it or not?
Yeah.
So that can
some
be
of
maybe...
Some of the other things that I always see that you can get out of going to a company audition that I try to remind myself is, just getting to see what else is out there, like getting outside your bubble. That's, you're already gaining a lot of insight into the dance world by seeing, okay, what other dancers are out there? What are people putting emphasis on? What is, learning about that company that you go to? That's maybe one way.
Also, like one dancer said to me, like also just checking, do I want to work with this person? And also like flipping the power situation. And then also, do I want to do that? Because my career is very short and very important to me. So do I see myself working with that person?
Yeah, and considering also that just as much as you're auditioning for a company, that company is auditioning for you. You're seeing if it's a fit from both sides. It's not a one-way thing.
Exactly. So
because
that could be interesting.
Yeah, a company could be very interested in you, but if you see, okay, this is not an environment that I would thrive in, or this is not a way of working that I would want to be a part of, you can also, be at peace with saying, yeah, I'm allowed to say no and look for something that will serve me better mentally, physically, in whatever way.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you say, are there things that a lot of dancers could work on internally to prepare themselves for facing this much criticism through their entire career, or rejection in the form of all the auditions we have to go through?
That's a good question. I think internally what you can do again is like protecting your human side and really try to, in case you can hear that it's harsh personal criticism, again, maybe like I did say before, like make the translation to something constructive for yourself. And I think also what is important also to just remind ourselves is that the criticism, behind the criticism is also a human being. That means the criticism is subjective, it's an opinion. It doesn't mean that it's the truth. So also hearing like, okay, this person thinks this and that. Do I think the same? Does it create doubt? Why is it creating doubt for me? And then saying, okay, if I don't agree, then thank you very much, but this is not working for me right now, and I'm gonna keep going. So like, I think what is helpful in the dance environment in general is kind of start to be more independent from your environment. Don't let it get inside of you. Hear it, take it, use it as a tool, but it shouldn't become you, and it shouldn't become your own voice.
Yeah, I think also looking at it like, what helped me is always seeing a variety of dancers in different companies, not just seeing one way of working, and that kind of helped me also find an appreciation of what I like in dancing. So if you get a rejection somewhere else, you can say, well, that's fine actually, because I prefer dancers when I see them, like really vibrant, and if they want to be more reserved, that's not my taste. And it like really developing your own taste, I think, helps you recognize other people's tastes and not take it too personally.
Exactly. Yeah.
At what point does a dancer maybe then need to change environment? So I'm thinking if someone's in a school or someone's in a company, and what would you say is kind of the breaking point where you say, okay, the way I'm getting criticism here or the amount of rejection I'm getting here probably calls for a change of environment?
I think what I could see, it's when it becomes like a huge impact on your performance. You can see that a person getting sick all the time or injured all the time. This is a sign that something is not very kind of balanced. So yeah, when you're performing, your motivation and your passion starts to drop drastically, I think that's the point where maybe you need to step out and find something else, because I don't think it's worth it. Can hear like, oh, it's one more year, and I'm like, yeah, but if it's one more year of injury, maybe it's not the best way. Maybe it's time to find something else and take maybe more time than you planned, but to make it in a healthy way, because afterwards the motivation is going to drop and the person's going to stop dancing, which is I think, a shame.
Yeah, it's amazing. When I think of the number of dancers that I went to school with or that I've known throughout my career who I often felt they left dance because of that, like a burnout in an environment that did not respect them or did not suit them properly, that they could have really thrived and been much happier elsewhere. And the turn was to step away from dance, which sometimes maybe for a healing process, someone does need to step away from dance completely. But I always think of like not to delay it too much if you feel the environment is causing all sorts of problems. Like you said, I think that's a great point, like getting sick a lot or a really drop in performance, even things where your confidence is so shaken, you get really severe stage fright, like you can no longer go on stage and it's not something that maybe the staff around you is supporting you to overcome. That's really tricky. Well, we're gonna wrap up this theme here. We will have another episode with Isabelle to talk on some other themes, but we'll wrap up this one. Would you like to share any contact information or any information about the type of workshops you give that are really useful for dancers as a resource?
Sure. So mostly now I work with dance companies and dance schools, mostly more around Switzerland. So I'm not going too much abroad. The further I went was Germany. So this is what I do. We can of course chat. Like I got even like messages from dancers directly from companies saying like, oh, I'm gonna put you in touch with the direction because it's looking really interesting to me what you're doing right now with other companies. In general, I do also like, I'm on Insta, of course, I have a website. So this is something you can find. Contact me, message me. And also what I do mostly is also, of course, private sessions on Zoom. So this is also possible. Of course, in person would always be better and easier, but Zoom sessions are also possible. So.
And which languages do you do your sessions in?
German, French, and English. I wish there
options.
would be more. Yeah, but I wish there would be more, but mostly these are the three languages I do speak. So.
Well, it's great to know. And thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. And
thank you so much.
I will be talking to you again soon.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to get notifications about future dance talks with Biscuit Ballerina.